The way a lot of Japanese cars have crept up in price the last 4 years has been ridiculous. And there's definitely a lot of cars you can buy for just under 10-15 grand now that in 3 or 4 years time are going to become way too unobtainable to buy. One of these cars is the Mark II MR2. I mean, you could also add in the Mark 1, but the SW20 is sort of at that price where you can still get them for a decent amount of money. Now this car is a proper JDM legend. It's probably arguably the best one out of the 3 generations. And there's not really many cars like an MR2. It's a cheap mid-engine sports car. Not just that, I mean, come on, it does look pretty good. They sort of look like mini Ferraris, and I kind of like that. Don't get me wrong though, these things are notorious for the good old snap oversteer, which ended a lot of MR2's lives. However, I do think I wouldn't get this if you were a younger car enthusiast, but if you've got a bit of driving experience under your belt, especially with mid-engine cars, it's a great car to buy. They're genuinely really good fun. I mean, I have been lucky enough to drive a Mark III, and I absolutely loved it. In my opinion, very underrated car. But the Mark II is just the iconic one out of all generations. Not only that, I do think they're at the stage where they're just starting to creep up in price, and they've went from the 6 grand mark to the 10 grand mark. And because it's an old Japanese car, they like to rust, and because of the snap oversteer, they do get in a lot of crashes. So I do think it's a car where there's becoming less and less of them, so they will become a rarity. I definitely think if you do like this car and you've got the money, I would buy one now before they do get to around 20 grand, because it's going to get to a point where it's not going to be worth buying the car. Like I said, I got to drive a Mark III and it was so much fun. I mean, they feel so nimble, and there's something about knowing that the engine's in the back. They're great cars, and I would definitely get an SW20 before they just become way too extortionate. Now, this next car definitely isn't the most reliable car in the world, but the FC RX-7 is one of the most underrated JDM cars in my opinion, and these cars are definitely starting to rise up in price. I mean, the FDRX7 is too far gone. This car has been completely ruined by inflation and is just way too expensive, but you can get an FCRX7 for just under 15 grand. I mean, I've seen some as low as 5 grand, but you probably want to stay away from them. Now, I mean, an RX-7 is a rotary, so they're not going to be reliable, and it's probably going to need an engine rebuild when you buy one. But, I mean, rotaries do sound really good, and I also think the FC RX-7 is a really nice looking car. I'm really not too sure why the FC is so slept upon, but I mean, I would definitely buy one if I had the knowledge and I knew how to maintain the rotary engine. And I mean, even then, I guess if you don't want to have the hassle of maintaining a rotary, you could just get an engine swap. I know for you guys over in America, you like to stick an LS engine in an RX-7, which I can't lie, that is pretty sick. I mean, over here in the UK, we don't really have that option, but in my opinion, I just wouldn't want to get rid of the rotary. But definitely a car that will become way too unobtainable in the next few years. This next car I'm going to talk about is rapidly increasing in price in the last few years, and it's actually getting ridiculous. I do think if you want to get one of these cars, you need to buy one either this year or as soon as possible, because I even think next year they could become way too unobtainable. And I'm talking about the Honda S2000. Now, obviously these are legendary cars. I mean, they can rev up to 9,000 RPM. You know, they're 2-litre VTEC engines. One of my friends has one of these, and it's so much fun. Anytime I'm in the car with him, the car just feels so tight. Like, around corners, it just sticks to the ground. And then, especially when it gets up to that sort of 9,000, you know, that 8,000, 7,000, 9,000 RPM range, oh, it sounds so good. And I mean, I think it's safe to say the S2000 is one of the best JDM looking cars. It looks so good. And the interior is all sort of based towards the driver, which is I think is really cool. When making this car and designing it, they wanted to make it the perfect driver's car, and I think we can all agree they nailed this. I know in some places they're way too expensive already, but I mean, where I'm from, you can pick them up for around 15 grand. I mean, some as low as 10, but definitely get them before they become, you know, way too extortionate. Do be careful though when it comes to buying an S2K, because a lot of them have been driven quite hard. I mean, unfortunately, my friend's S2000, a few months after buying it, the engine did blow up, but just make sure you look out for a few issues here and there, and it should be alright. Now, the prices on this next car are getting a little bit ridiculous, especially for what it is. You used to be able to pick these cars up for around 2 grand. I mean, even lower than that. And of course, I'm talking about the Mark 1 MX-5. They are definitely future classic cars. I mean, they look great. They've got pop-up headlights, so what more could you want? I'm lucky enough to have an NB MX-5, which is the Mark 2, and honestly, it is such a fun car. However, unfortunately, like a lot of cars on this list, they have a lot of rust issues. They like to go in the front chassis rails, they like to go in the wheel arches. MX-5s just rust everywhere, and my car has suffered with rust. But if you do get one that's been fully restored, one that's just not got rust on at all, then I would definitely look into it, because like I said, these cars are great fun. They're actually pretty reliable. And I mean, and they are shooting up in price, especially the Mark 1s. Mark 2s are sort of sitting quite low on the depreciation right now, but a Mark 1, they're really going up in price. Best attribute to an MX-5 is finding parts for them. It's just so easy. It's easy, and it's also just really cheap. Anytime my car's had issues, finding parts has been so easy. Like, it's honestly been the quickest process. I know that with some cars, you know, you could be looking for weeks to find a part, or you're paying way too much money than you should be. And I mean, in some cases, importing parts in from different countries, which is just, it takes ages, and it's even more expensive. See, I do think an MX-5 or Miata, you know, depending on where you're from, is a really good, solid option for a JDM sports car. Now, funnily enough, this next car actually has a similarity with a certain Lamborghini, and in my opinion, one of the best V6s ever made. And of course, I'm talking about the Nissan 300ZX. These cars look so good, and they sound great as well. But I mean, I've been keeping a close price on these for a few years now, and I can tell you, they are starting to shoot up in price. You used to be able to pick one of these up for around 5-6 grand, and now they're like 10, some are even 20, but you can still get them for just under 15. I have heard these cars can be a bit of a pain to work on, and I know the twin turbo models do have 4-wheel steering, which, if that goes wrong, it's probably quite a pain to fix. I'm pretty sure most people would be happy with just the regular, naturally aspirated 3-litre version. And something that I like about a Nissan 300ZX is you can pick these up with a T-bar roof, which is pretty cool. Interesting to know what cars you think could creep up in the next few years, because a lot of these 90s Japanese cars are becoming more and more unobtainable now, and they're just not worth the price that they're set at. Personally, I would love an S2000. I just think they're such great looking cars, and they handle so well. I did a video a couple of weeks ago on JDM cars that have sort of been forgotten about, so there are still definitely some good deals out there. So definitely check out that video if you enjoyed this one. Definitely a few cars in that video that I could have mentioned in this one, but they are a lot cheaper than the ones in this video. And feel free to subscribe. I mean, it is free, so you might as well. But anyway, I'll see you in the next one. Ciao for now.